Okay, welcome. This is episode 1. It's February 16th. This is the Intelligent Ape podcast. And we are focused on fact-based discussion leading to insights and hopefully new experiences. Let me just introduce you to today's speaker, who is Manuel. Hey, Manuel.
Hello.
I don't know if you could introduce yourself, maybe, or you want me to introduce you?
No. I can give you the 5 cents version.
Yeah.
My name is Manuel Sali. I'm a chemical engineer. I've been working mostly in the petrochemical industry, but also related to oil, gas, coal, and all the sources that eventually turn out into petrochemicals. And I teach training courses, and it's very good to be here and discussing the world of energy.
Cool. So, just by way of background for this podcast, which we will stream, although not live, basically the genesis of this is, I find increasingly the world's becoming more complicated. I don't have time to read books, right? And by the way, my name is Fred Flintstone. You won't see my face because we have mortgages and jobs and and all sorts of things. So just to protect the innocent. So the world's becoming more complicated, and I don't get time to read books. I don't. Many of us don't. I find the news very unsatisfactory. It's not analytical enough. There are lots of podcasts. There's a kind of the dark web out there where people go into some really interesting subjects. I've been listening to a lot of the kind of the YouTubers and podcasters, but they end up spending 2 to 3 hours engaged in kind of opinion-based discussion. And I really want to get into the facts and have more incisive conversations. So this is the first of hopefully many attempts to do that. The format will be a little bit different. So we've, I think the genesis of this conversation is a kind of a brief that we discussed, and I'll go over the exam question, like what is it that we want to talk about. And I think what may be different to some other podcasts is you very kindly brought a whole bunch of exhibits and data, which we'll try and discuss. And hopefully it'll probably take more than an hour, but we'll get to some conclusions or some insights, and we'll post it on the web, and we'll see what people think.
Okay,
right?
Perfect.
So I think the first thing that might be useful to do is maybe if we just discuss the brief that we discussed.
Okay.
So what I'll do is, without being too disruptive, I'll try and I'll try and just describe it for you here.
Yes. No, that's fine.
You remember the brief?
Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, the topic of conversation is kind of the economics of global energy, and just for the listener here, Manuel is incredibly well positioned to talk about this, not only as a chemical engineer but also as a kind of energy economist and strategist. You've worked for some of the major oil production entities in the world, spent time in the Middle East, and also I think you train the industry, right, on some of these topics.
Absolutely, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I thought it'd be great to have a conversation with you. The initial discussion that we had was around a couple of topics. The first, I was just interested in just better understanding, the supply of oil. I always get confused in terms of how much is produced, which countries, and just from listening to you over the years, you talk about it's not the average view of country production, but it's also, you need to double click on in terms of quality, and that makes a big difference, as well as sort of other forms of energy, gas, shale, etc., renewables.
Absolutely.
So my initial thought was, it'd be great to just idiot's guide to what is the supply, right, both in terms of production as well as reserves. The second topic was around just demand. Again, I get confused between, the kids in Europe have been going on these climate change marches.
Yes.
So what is the big kind of energy consumption category?
Correct.
How much of it is it discretionary and controllable by the individual versus structural part of the way industry is formed, airlines, etc.
Yes.
So it'd be good to get that and your view in terms of growth and what demand might look like. The third topic I was thinking was about how supply and demand will kind of mismatch or not. We also talked about the impact of electric and solar. Like, could they make a dent in that situation?
Correct.
I have no idea about the economics of energy. How much it costs for different sources, and why do people say renewables are really expensive, right? And I think there's some fixed variable kind of aspect going on there.
Yes.
And then the reason, I suppose, the interesting part then is, having understood all of that, is just to have a kind of a free-wheeling discussion on the geopolitics of energy, right? I'm hear a lot of myth, and although I don't expect, you probably have as good as idea as I do in terms of what could be politically true or false. But at the very least, if we can determine what is plausible versus implausible,
right? Yes.
Right, based on the economics. So the list we discussed was, from a Cheney Rumsfeld perspective, given the basics of the industry, like, how would they think about the world, right, and what's important and what isn't.
Correct.
There's a question around USA-Saudi relationships. How screwed are the Saudis? Do they really need to, reinvent themselves? Can they, will the gravy train end? Iraq,
right?
What have they got? Could it have possibly been the rationale for the Iraq war and the USA's obsession? Could it have really have been energy? Love to discuss that. Libya,
right. Yes,
right? Is the whole light crude theory, is that bullshit? Is it correct? Afghanistan, what's the deal? Is there some energy pipeline thing? Wanted to talk about that. Syria, there's all sorts of pipeline. Qatar pipeline to Europe versus all of this type of stuff.
Turkey,
Russia, the Turkey, whatever. And in Afghanistan, there's a TAPI, there's a Turkmenistan, Afghan, Pak, India pipeline, right? There's that.
Correct. Yes.
Russia, like, how screwed are we? How important is Ukraine to them as a result? Right. Venezuela, WTF?
Yes, of course.
Right, yada yada, and there's a whole bunch of others. So
of course.
Now, obviously, you're under no compulsion to adhere to any of that, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
Correct.
In terms of at least some of the kind of discussion I thought we might end up having. So I think, let me just go back to the screen. Let me just get you back on here. So I just showed some of that kind of agenda type of thing, and so let's just have a chat. I have some of the slides you sent and some of these exhibits, and so while you talk, if you tell me what to present, I can do that.
Correct.
And then we can have a chat. So how do we
perfect.
educate me, man? Like, we need to demystify right in the next hour or so, and arm the sort of the three people who are going to watch this, one of whom will be my mother.
Yes. And my mother too.
Your mother as well. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, no, that's good. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And it's great that we're having this conversation. And it all started probably 3-4 years ago, the first time we had this chat over a pint. Anyway, I think it's the world of energy is changing so much, and there are so many variables out there that it's important to discuss it, to try to understand it. Obviously, there are no simple answers. Everything will be influenced by many other things. But I think it's important to have an educated conversation, right? And the more people know about this is better for everybody. So let me maybe just say this. I don't think the world of energy has been under so much flux for the last probably 100 years or so.
Really?
I would say, yeah, because the last big shift would have happened precisely about 100 years ago when, during World War I, where several countries like the UK decided to switch from coal to oil.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the moment when the oil supply and the whole world of oil basically comes in. Before that, we were the world living with coal, right? And all sorts of renewable energy like biomass or wood and stuff like that.
When did that transition happen? Do you know?
In the UK specifically, it happened with it was just the beginning, just before World War One. This is Winston Churchill when he was in he was in charge of the
Admiralty.
The Admiralty. He makes the decision to switch the fuel for ships from coal to oil.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a few years, around those years is also when Henry Ford is starting to produce the first internal combustion engines in the the continuous line in Detroit, and it's also bringing all this new demand for gasoline. But that's how the whole world.
And where was the oil back then?
Well, the oil was mostly, there was a lot of oil in the US, always. I mean, you have to remember that
Texas,
the oil, well, before Texas, it was all happening in Pennsylvania. The first oil rigs were in Titusville in Pennsylvania.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember Rockefeller was based in Cleveland before New York. So it's all happening in that sort of northeast region.
Trump territory.
Well, yes. And then, of course, Texas comes, but a little bit later.
Yep.
And I think it's 1911. There's this huge gusher happening in Texas, and that's when everybody moves down there. But you see all these different companies, and eventually oil consolidates, and then it breaks apart again with the whole antitrust and so forth. So all I'm saying is that kind of ushers the initiation.
But where would the British Navy have got its oil from?
Oh, correct. So I missed that. So yeah, that was all North America, but then at about the same time, places like Romania and of course Russia around the Caspian Sea, there's a lot of oil that is found over there.
Interesting.
And so this brings in a couple of interesting characters. The Nobels, the same Nobel for the Nobel Prize, and the Rothschilds. They had investments in Russia in those oil fields before the Russian Revolution.
Oh.
Yeah, and because this is all happening late 19th century, early 20th. So that's where Shell is born. Shell is born by basically taking the oil out of that region and distributing it around the world, coming to Europe. And then, of course, Asia is also picking up. And in Indonesia, the Dutch find a lot of oil. That forms this company called Royal Dutch, Shell, which eventually Royal Dutch and Shell, they get together. And it's interesting because we always think of Shell as a British company, but it's actually majority Dutch. From what I remember.
Because I know, I mean, from my basic history, in the end of the First World War, when they carved up the Ottoman Empire, so there's this apocryphal story, I don't know if it's true, where the Brits basically, they were divvying up the Ottoman Empire, and the French basically were obsessed about getting all of the cool kind of beachfront property, Damascus, not Damascus, but Beirut,
exactly.
Syria, all the nice sort of places where you could have a nice cup of apple tea. And the Brits apparently had already figured out that the oil was going to be critical for the Navy, and they were sending geologists out to try and figure out where the oil was.
Yes.
So somebody told me that story that the Brits got a lot more of the oil rich territory.
Yes.
And the French hadn't figured it out. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah. Directly I didn't know exactly that story because I know, I mean, what you're talking is happening around 1918, right? Soon after the World War. Perhaps 1919 or something like that. The big exploration in the Middle East is happening around the 20s and into the 30s. So that's why I'm not exactly sure this is it. Okay. But you're right in the sense that the British sent people to Iran. And again, people don't remember, but the company we know today as BP, it was originally Anglo-Iranian. And they found the first oil in Iran, as I say, early 30s around that time. And then Saudi Arabia comes to the picture, but until the later 30s. But that's mostly American influence. So it's happening in Bahrain, it's happening in UAE, and of course the big find in Saudi Arabia, which is the Dammam 7 well, which basically brings Saudi at the forefront of production.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but then again, none of that would have happened unless you had this pull from the demand side, right? The aeronautic industry, the car industry is booming, etc., etc. So that's really what drives all this, and we can confidently say the 20th century was a century of oil. But so that's why I come back to the point. I think we're in the middle of another one of those big revolutions, right?
Got it.
100 years later, for a number of reasons. So first of all, gas has come into the picture in a big way, and it's difficult to separate gas from oil. I actually can sort of consider them together.
Yeah.
In many ways, and that's why in my discussion I'm going to focus mostly on oil, which then relates to gas, and then we have all the other sources, right? Coal, solar, wind, nuclear, etc. That's one side. The other thing is, of course, greenhouse gases, global warming, the whole environmental and changing perception, which is growing in terms of.
So what do you do? Are you a denier?
No. I think
you're not. Yeah.
It's 12 degrees today. It's February in London, so it feels warmer than it used to be. So there's obviously a lot of that going on too. But interestingly, there's also a big technological shift, and we shouldn't forget that. It's the rise of electric cars, electrification in general.
Do you want me to show your framework there?
Why don't we do that? Yes, because this is what I do in my free time. I try to give some shape to these things.
You're a geek.
And I created basically handwritten a little dashboard.
Yeah. So okay. So the dashboard is up.
Yes, and in a way this will help us also sort of divide the discussion as we go along.
So this is, we're hacking as we go, right? So it's all real time, but it's better than two old men just talking total shit. It's shit on a page, which is obviously better.
Exactly.
So talk me through this, man. This sounds this looks good.
Absolutely. So you need to think of the label that I have right at the top, which is demand.
Yeah.
Right? So that's obviously it's always a supply and demand thing, and from that perspective, I always go back to fundamentals. So think of demand, demographics. How much is population growing? How is quality of life improving around the world? And how is consumption of energy per head going to play into this? Right, because we know we have different levels of energy intensity. And just as a little comment, let me just mention this. A lot of people don't know this. About 1 billion people today around the world still don't have access to electricity, on a daily basis. So that just tells you how the potential of all that energy that can still eventually permeate into the world, and it's obviously driven by demographics. But we also need to make sure to understand that population is not growing as fast as before.
Yeah.
China is maturing in terms of its demand. So who's going to take over that growth? Is it going to be India? Will it be Africa maybe one day? Of course, it's not one Africa. There are many Africas, and we need to understand that. So all of this is playing on the demand side. Now, please move to the bottom of the page where I have the supply.
Yeah.
If there is demand, there will be supply. This is true for fuels, it's true for drugs, it's true for everything.
But just up here in demand, you've got obviously growth in demand, the switching effects between types of energy.
Oh, right, yes.
Electrification,
correct,
which is another kind of substitute.
Yes.
And then is this kind of redesign. Kind of energy consumption intensity.
Well,
is that what that is?
Well, no. Redesign. It is mostly technological.
Of what? Production or consumption?
Oh, consumption.
Okay.
Let me give you a quick example. An internal combustion car today will probably require 6, 7, 8 liters per 100 kilometers.
Yeah.
The ICE, the internal combustion engine, could be much more efficient than that. They could make you could get the same 100 kilometers with 2 liters. Right? So there's a lot of things that can happen in redesign. Another example, houses could be better insulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the more you do that will affect demand for energy.
Okay, and so just a thought on that is it would be great to get the the potential significance of each of these things. But let's move on to supply.
Yeah, so right now I'm just putting the frame. Right? Demand on top, supply on the bottom, and then we'll dive into each of these things. So on the supply side is, of course, where is the energy going to come from? Is it the existing sources? And even in the existing sources, you also have to differentiate. There are different types, right? There's what we call the conventional, the tight oil, which is all the shale story, which is a lot of new supply that was not
Is
there
that
before.
secure or is that sensitive?
Well, it is secure. I mean, if you're in the United States, today half of their oil is coming from shale.
So what is sensitive?
What I call sensitive is the sort of the wild cards. These are the countries you were talking about.
Oh, okay, fine.
Iran, Iraq, Russia itself, Venezuela. Venezuela is conventional, but it's also a bit of a wild card.
Got it.
And I'll show you later how production in Venezuela has changed dramatically.
Oh, and in secure you have sort of easy versus difficult. That's interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so we've got pipelines and then alternatives.
Storage.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly right. Right. So if you like, what I'm trying to do is I'm looking at supply and demand, and I'm seeing what are the major issues that are affecting each one of them. Right.
Yeah.
The four big boxes below demand, and the four big boxes next to supply, and then I like to think of these levers in the middle.
Yeah.
Right. I think of it as a dial or a lever of some sort, and there are three big ones.
Yeah.
The first one is geopolitics. Because of course, whatever is happening, the world is very different if you have Obama or Trump in the White House, right? The second lever is, of course, the price.
Yeah.
And I always go back to the price of oil because that's usually what drives everything else. Everything compares to the price of oil. And the third lever is perception. This is changes in behavior, changes in in the way people see the world. And we know those things can sometimes. They you don't see them very well, but they suddenly flip the world the way people see it. Right, and this is, for example, the environmental movement and so forth.
Yep.
So if you like, the boxes at the top, the boxes at the bottom, and the levers in the middle, which sort of help you light different parts of the picture.
Got it. So bottom line, right? If you look at those demand aspects, so just is demand going to grow significantly?
Yes. Well, demand will continue to grow. Yes, and even considering the more conservative demographic growth, which we know is the population is starting to level a little bit.
It's a consumption per capita is gonna.
Correct. That's absolutely right. Because I mean, think of China, right? Just see how in 25 years the energy demand increased tremendously, and new countries will take over some of that growth. And India is an obvious.
So,
one.
like, where is demand now, and where is it going to be?
Well, demand is still is very large still in North America and Europe.
But what is it? What is it globally? Like, how much is it?
Right. So, demand for oil, demand for energy in general, and if you look at it in sort of in oil equivalents, you're talking of about this. Well, no, let me go back one step. Let's take oil itself, right?
Yeah.
So oil demand is about 100 million barrels a day, a little bit less than 100 million.
Yeah.
And this is maybe the more important thing to me. It's demand grew by about 2.2 or 2.5% in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It's expected to continue growing by about 1.2%.
Okay, so about half the rate.
That's important. That's correct.
Okay.
And there are a combination of things factors for that.
Got it. So that's, I mean, inflation adjusted 1%.
Well, no, because this is volume.
Just
so
volume.
It has nothing to do with inflation.
Okay, so that's pretty flattish.
It's flattish, yeah. That's exactly right.
So then, if growth is flattish, I would think switching to renewables, electrification, and redesign are going to be pretty significant.
Well, yes, that's right, and that's exactly what brings a lot of the variables. Can you put the first pie chart that I have?
Yeah, sure.
Because this one will help to understand where is demand. Of energy. So you can see right there, the biggest demand of energy in the world is for power generation. That takes almost 40%.
So electric power generation?
Yeah. So when you get home and you switch on the lights, somebody is burning something somewhere for that to happen. We also have demand for heating, which I call residential and commercial heating, and then industry heating. Which is also over 40%. It's almost half.
So industry fuel and heating is the power they need to run diesel generators and blah, blah,
absolutely. Blah. Yes. I mean, if you go to a refinery or a chemical plant or a cement plant, they're burning a lot of fuel in those industrial processes. And then residential and commercial is, of course, our homes and offices. And then transportation fuels is also there, which is a little bit less than 20%. And that's funny because a lot of us think of, gasoline or petrol for cars like the biggest, but it's by no means the biggest.
What's a double click of, air travel versus ground travel?
Ground travel is much higher than that. I mean, it's the biggest portion. Yeah, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but air travel is small. If anything, air travel is probably more important on the CO2 side because it's a big supplier of greenhouse gases and it's growing very fast.
Oh, really? More than?
Well, not more than, but flying. If you fly across the Atlantic Ocean, just one flight, the amount of CO2 you generate in that flight as a person is more than you would generate normally in the whole year at home if you didn't fly.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it's a big chunk. But anyway, we'll come back to greenhouse gases later. And then I have that little other slice that you see there, which I'm calling non-energy or feedstocks. Some people also call it non-combustibles. This is what ends up in petrochemicals. This is plastics and fibers and shoe soles and insulation for homes and all those things.
So when you look at the kind of substitution effects, like that 36% there, could that get nuclearized?
A lot of some of it already is nuclearized, but it could be more nuclearized, right? And that's where the whole situation starts getting interesting because just imagine, Sumit, in a world where you suddenly bring many more electric cars, the growth in electric cars is very large. So then look back at the pie chart, and that would mean that fuels for transportation would shrink, whereas electricity would grow, right? And then the next question is, of course, where do you get this energy from, right? This is just what you use it for. Where do you get it from? And that, why don't we do the next slide, because
so this is energy consumption irrespective of source.
Exactly right, yes. And then it brings us to this pie chart, which is, if you like, the energy diet of the world. So this is where it comes from. And this is a good one too, because you see a third of all our energy is oil. Or derivatives of oil.
Do you have the previous one cut by this?
No, not exactly. But the way to do this is you would have to replicate the previous one, copy it for each of the different. Of the different.
Do you have a sense then? So like if you.
I can describe it easily.
So if I'm just going to go back and show. So for the power generation.
Right.
How does the second pie chart look?
Exactly. So power generation is mostly going to be nuclear. Well, all of nuclear basically is up there. You have mostly gas and coal, very little oil, and all the renewables are there.
Got it.
Right? When you look at transportation fuels, obviously the majority is going to be oil.
Yeah. So getting back to the first pie chart, so basically, in terms of oil, the oil industry, power generation is mostly nuclear and coal. So the oil
and gas.
And
gas is important, very important. Yes.
Okay, so that is then that's got it.
Exactly.
Sorry, what was the next one you were going to do?
Yeah, so
heating.
So correct. So and if you talk of heating, again you have gas providing a lot of.
That's major, right? Yeah.
It's major, especially here in Europe or in the US. And indirectly you have electricity too. Although we know that electric heating is not as efficient.
It's very expensive.
Exactly right. So you could basically redraw the chart of the demand.
Well, we should do that. If we could do that.
Correct. Yes.
That would be really, really interesting.
Okay.
So then I'm looking at the first chart. So power generation is non-oil, but is gas and nuclear and coal. Heating, the grey and the green is mostly gas.
It's yes, gas. Well, and coal. And
coal.
You use a lot of coal in places like India, for example, for heating.
The coal in India is for power stations, no?
Well, most of it is, yes, but you still have places that are running in. I guess yes. Let's take a step back. So yes, it's mostly for power generation, correct.
And then transport is mainly oil.
Exactly, that's right. And then when you look at the non-oil or the feedstocks, the petrochemical side, again, it's mostly gas and oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, very little coal, and obviously you don't use renewables or nuclear in any, no renewables.
So oil is basically mainly in the orange.
Well, yes. Yes.
That's the. I mean, right? It's nuclear and coal in the blue, and it's mainly gas in the green and the grey.
Yeah, correct. Yes. Although don't forget, you also use oil in industry fuels and heating, because they do use a lot of sort of the heavier fractions of oil there for fuels. So yeah, but you're right. You're absolutely right. So the oil portion is between the orange and the green, right? The gas will be a lot of the blue and a lot of the grey. Yeah.
So in terms of substitution and electrification,
correct. So
I don't see like I can't think of any alternative in cold countries to gas for heating. We could nuclearize power generation, which would be good. It would reduce our dependence on coal, mainly.
Yes.
I don't see big industry stopping to use oil.
Right. Well, especially the energy intensity of a cement plant.
You're not going to run that on electric. Correct. You're not, right? You don't want to, and you can't do it. They can't have their own nuclear power station.
Correct.
So it seems what's most addressable is the transportation. Yes. Like if we wanted to reduce, because people talk about screw the guys in the Middle East, let's reduce our energy dependence on them. Other than shrinking the transportation, I don't see how we could do that from the demand side.
Correct. You could still shrink the domestic and residential.
Through insulation.
Better insulation, and you could also go electric there.
But for heating, that's tough. I would say that's the significant portion of that residential is heating. Like that heating bubble there, the 22%. If we went ape shit on insulating and we kind of walked around wearing Michelin Man suits, right, and turned the heating down or whatever.
Correct.
How much is that going to shrink by?
You could easily take off 15-20% of that. I can tell you why. Our homes here are incredibly inefficient from that perspective.
But that's 20%. I mean, that's not a lot. That's 20% of 20%.
20% of 20%. Correct. Yes. So it wouldn't dent the whole thing. But let me give you more. So insulation is one piece. There are other things like heat pumps. I don't know if you're aware of heat pumps, but these are little machines that you can put in your home, and they can take some. It works like a refrigerator in reverse.
Okay.
All right. So you could use sort of the cold air from outside. It helps you heat your home inside.
Got it.
Just installing a heat pump will cost you a few $100s, and that reduces electricity consumption and heat consumption.
But we're talking 20 on 20. It's like 4-5%.
Right.
Overall.
Yes, but I mean 4 or 5%. If you go back to the take the number of the 100.
That's 5 years of growth.
Correct. Right. And
but it's not. So that's not going to have. So on your top row.
Yeah, correct.
It's not going to.
It's not going to dent the in a big way. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
And let me tell you this, and I think this is really important to say it up front. We still need oil. We cannot live without it, and we still actually need to explore for oil.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. If you don't do anything, if you just leave oil as it is today, it would decline by about 4% per year. And that means by that.
Seriously?
That by 2030 you wouldn't have you will have very, very little oil. So you still need to invest. Which is, just recently, last week in The Economist, there was an article on ExxonMobil, and they were criticizing Exxon basically for saying, you're planning to invest $9 or $10 billion in more production of oil in Guyana and in all these places. And well, if we don't do that, we won't be able to keep up. So this is where the other big question comes in.
Supply.
Exactly. Can you change the mix of the supply?
Talk to me about supply.
Correct, exactly. So that brings us to the other pie chart, right? The other pie chart, remember I was saying about a third of our energy comes from oil. 28% or so is coal, and then another quarter of it or so comes from gas.
Yep.
So look at this. 85% of the world of energy is still coming from carbon sources. Oil, coal, or gas. Right? But the interesting number here is if you went back to the 1970s, the oil contribution was half. and gas was very little.
Right.
But over time, actually just 5 or 6 years ago, gas was below 20%, and now it's 24%.
So in the gas, which is the green here, do you include shale?
Oh yes.
So how much of the green, this 24% is shale?
It's not that much. It's because shale is really only happening in the United States today.
So the gas here is a sort of the Qatari and
the Australians and of course
the Russians.
Yeah.
And then what about the stuff in the Central Asia? Is that big?
It is big. It's getting bigger in some places. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, those Central Asian republics. They're obviously not as big as Russia, but they are producing gas. And don't forget Australia. Australia is a big exporter of coal and gas.
Oh, they have gas as well.
Yeah, they are. They do in the western coast, especially. So if you look at China today, they're importing their gas from places like Australia, and of course Qatar.
So the stuff that like in India, for instance, they have these butane gas, or I think it's
the
butane.
LPG is.
There's something you use for cooking. Most people use gas cylinders for cooking. It's not piped in.
Correct.
And they use LPG as well.
Correct. LPG is a mix of propane, butane.
Okay, yeah.
And you get a little bit of LPG from oil, but you also get it from gas. It's about 5% of the content of gas on average is LPG.
And that's all in that green?
It's yes. So that specific cooking fuel is it's.
So is the stuff that comes from Russia via the Ukraine to Germany or whatever? Is that butane?
No, that's mostly methane.
Methane, okay.
Which is the simplest of the hydrocarbons, just one carbon only.
Yeah.
When it's an issue of definition. When people talk about natural gas, we usually refer to the mix of hydrocarbons, which is about 90% methane.
Oh.
Okay. The rest is what is the LPG and some of the stuff that they use in petrochemicals and stuff like that. So just be careful. But yeah, here in Europe, when you switch on your stove and flame comes out, that's methane, right? Okay. And that's what you mostly talk about when you refer to gas.
And then the stuff in the bottle is the butane.
The stuff in the bottle is butane and propane. It's a mix of both. We call it LPG. Got it. Yeah, and I have a chart a little bit later on where I explain that.
So, from a supply side, so like on your chart there, you had kind of. So where does all this stuff come from? Like for each of these,
each
oil,
of those parts, exactly.
yada yada yada.
What's the biggest supply?
What's the deal? Yeah, where is it all? Talk to me.
Can I say one more thing before we switch?
Yeah.
Because this is important. Renewables on that pie chart looks small. It's about 10%.
Yeah.
And it includes everything from hydroelectric to solar and wind and so forth. So just to clarify something there, it looks small, but it's been growing very fast. All right. About half of that is hydro, hydro is very good and it's very stable and it's obviously, but it's expensive to build dams, right? And there's a limit to how many you can build.
Yeah.
So virtually all the growth is happening in solar and wind. That's important, and we'll come back to costs later.
So, how could best case scenario 2050? How could this change?
Well, so that's one. It's a very interesting question, and a lot of people are debating it. How fast can renewables actually grow?
Yes.
Right. And if you had renewables growing to 30% of supply, 30% of supply by 2040, it would be off the charts of any historical correlation we have for any type of energy source in the world.
In terms of growth.
In terms of growth. Nothing has grown so fast ever before, so that you get to 30%, and it's only 30%. That's why I tell you, we're still into conventional sources.
And so, would that be mainly wind?
It's mostly wind and solar. Both of them go together, and this is a really important point. Let me mention.
Why do they go together?
Well, not together, but
they would have to,
because they are the best that we have at the moment. So that's why that's where people are investing their money. Let's put it that way. But you cannot do wind and solar on their own. You need gas in the picture for a very simple reason. Those renewables are variable by nature. Right? You only get sun during the day, wind blows one day and it doesn't blow the next day. So in order to be able to supply, for example, power generation, you need gas to take the shocks of the system
smooth,
because of the variability of
smooth
the
it
renewables.
out.
Correct, right?
Why gas?
because gas plants are easier to switch on and switch off. If you have a big combined cycle gas plant, it makes it a lot easier, and it also gas is cleaner. So it's a winner from all those perspectives, right?
Dude, yes.
That's important. That's important. There's a really, I don't have the chart here, but we can explore that for another discussion. But you can actually see today in the UK what are the sources of power generation at any point in time. There are websites where you can go and they'll tell you real time, and it's really interesting when you see it. So you see nuclear is the blanket at the bottom. It's about 20% of the supply of power.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very stable, very clean, but people don't like nuclear for other reasons. Very politically charged. So you have nuclear, and then you have wind and solar kind of jumping up and down. You have gas taking the shocks of those jumps, right? And then you have coal, which is just a little slit at the top. Coal today is no more than 5%, 10%. It's zero in the summer or in the warm months. But if you go back 10 years, Sumi, coal used to give 25% of the power in this country. So go back to the pie chart. Coal is shrinking, gas is growing, renewables are growing, and those are the big questions. How fast and who will do it?
So it doesn't, like, looking at this, it doesn't seem that what do we replace coal with?
Gas. You can I mean, not in an existing plant, but basically the point would be to eventually decommission the old coal plants and then switch them to gas.
So we've established that the demand is unlikely to materially change. Mm-hmm. We've got 1% growth a year.
Right. In energy demand in general.
In energy demand in general. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can curtail that by 10 to 20% by doing a bunch of 4 to 5% things.
Correct. Something like that, and that, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it seems that we have to replace coal, probably with gas.
Right.
And renewables will only grow by 2 to 3x.
If we're lucky, that's right.
So what do you replace oil with?
Well,
nothing, right?
Nothing, or that's exactly why if you ask different people, you ask them what's oil demand supposed to be in 2040, and everybody will tell you, they will give you a big range, but some people say it could be 110 million barrels, it could be 70 million barrels, but you still need 70 million. Today we are at 100.
So just going back to the let me just put it on a split here. Mm-hmm. Just going back to the transportation, which is 18%, which is all oil.
Mostly, yes.
What with electric cars and all of that? How much of that 18%, which is fully oil right now,
correct,
could we swap out?
Yeah. If you were incredibly optimistic and switched all of the electric cars, all cars to electric, the number would be no more than half of that.
Half.
Yeah.
So we'd get rid of 10%.
Correct.
Of demand. Well, 10%. And are the units the same here? Let's have a look. Is that oil equivalent?
Yeah, because it's all, yes, so everything was put in oil equivalent.
So transport is 18%, oil is 33%. So 18 out of the 33 is transport, let's say.
Something like that, correct.
So we could reduce the transport, say, by 10%. So the oil then would go from 33 to 23.
Yes. If you make the calculation like that, yes.
But then that 10 would have to come from electricity.
Right.
So then would gas go up or would nuclear go up?
No, well, the way the world looks today...
So where would that 10 get generated?
It would come mostly from gas, because that's the automatic, easier thing to do. It would also require renewable growth, right? But again, depends on how fast renewables can grow. And then the other big question is nuclear, right? And that's why I was saying, if you asked the same question 8 years ago, people would be happy with nuclear, and they would even invest in nuclear, because nuclear is very stable, very, very.
It's great.
It's clean,
Yeah.
but it's just politically
The
very charged.
Fukushima, whatever.
Fukushima. So Japan decided Fukushima.
Fukushima.
Japan decides to shut down most of their nuclear. Germany decides to shut down more than half of their nuclear
Why?
a few years ago. Political issues. Ms. Merkel decided.
So this is your perception topic.
Well, exactly right. Exactly right.
That's interesting. Because when you said perception, I thought that was kind of BS.
No.
But actually, that's a massive...
it's the public opinion and the pressure and the politics, right, involved in that. You want to make this interesting. I mean, Russia is signing off on the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which will cross the Baltic Sea to ship gas from Russia directly to Germany. And by doing that, they will cut off Ukraine and Poland from the transmission or the transportation, and obviously that's a big thing for them, because they make money out of transmitting gas, and it makes Germany more dependent on Russia. And this is because they have to. This is because of the freaking nuclear power stations they shut down those years back, right?
So I had this perception, right, which was, the US apparently become energy independent. The first time they were net exporter.
Yeah, well, they're still not net exporters, but they're definitely exporting now.
Right, because of shale or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I thought, oh, great, Elon Musk, electrification.
Yes.
This is great. We won't need oil. We won't have to get sucked into all of this geopolitical stuff that goes on. Mm-hmm. But you're actually saying the main movable piece here is transportation. Mm-hmm. And if 10% of that 30% oil goes electric...
Yeah.
It's gonna have to be delivered through gas, combination of gas, renewables, and nuclear.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And nuclear takes 10 years to build a station.
Yeah, if you build it, because there's very little construction.
They're not being commissioned.
Correct.
And so that puts you back to gas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why we say. Remember, I mentioned that the 19th century was a century of coal, and the 20th was a century of oil. The 21st will be a century of gas. That's exactly right.
So now, didn't it was about 10 years ago, there was a guy in T. Boone something Pickens.
Yeah.
He took a massive position in gas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he got completely shafted. He lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Gas prices declined significantly,
right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Have they recovered now? Or?
They are starting... they actually haven't recovered so much, but what has happened
why is that?
The price of oil has come down, and there's been a little bit of convergence there, because, I would like... I'm going to talk about prices in a short while, and I'd like you to see, but again, everything always goes back to the price of oil, and to basically say how many dollars do you pay per unit of energy. And you can measure it in BTUs like they do in the States, or you can do it in joules or calories or whatever. And it's always something like that. It's actually interesting to see that oil is more expensive than gas.
Yeah.
Right? But take another look at this, Sumi. Shell has been moving away from oil and into gas, right? So Royal Dutch Shell, the traditional, huge producer and seller of oil, is today becoming a gas company. That's telling you a lot, and they're obviously looking far into the future.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was surprising. Even in North America, they were getting rid of some oil assets. There may have been other reasons why they were getting rid of them, but the point is they were getting rid of them to invest in gas, and they bought this, the British company, this British gas company a couple of years ago too.
So, bottom line here, right, is we're still going to need the oil and we're still going to need the gas.
Yes.
So where do those two things come from?
Correct, exactly. Well, why don't we look at the maps that I sent you?
Which page do you want me to...
It's just the next slide. Just go straight there. These maps show you the largest reserves of gas in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, it's only gas. So and it's only the top 10. Who has the largest reserves? You find Russia, Iran, and Qatar.
Yeah.
And these three have almost half of the world's reserves of gas. You have a couple other people there. You have Turkmenistan. You can see Saudi Arabia, KSA, and the UAE. They show a little bit of gas. It's not because they're very big in oil. They're not so big on gas. Just remember that. Qatar is very big in gas, and Iran is big in both. Then we have, of course, the US, and the shale revolution has been happening there. That number in the US has been growing over time. It used to be smaller than.
Dude, this is a killer chart, man.
Yeah, it is. It's only the reserves, right? Of course.
So these are the reserves.
Correct. It's not telling you anything about production.
And it's not, and in gas, a reserve. All reserves are created equal.
In gas, all reserves are created equal.
In terms of extraction?
No, not at all. Because sometimes gas comes associated with oil. We call that associated gas, and that gas is very good. It's very cheap, because most of your investment is in drilling the oil, and the gas comes out almost for free.
So who's got associated?
So from there, the US has a lot of associated. Saudi has a lot of associated. Iran has associated. Qatar and Russia are a little bit less.
I mean, I'm blown away. Like, tell you what I find surprising about this. Iran is blowing me away.
Right. Well, you were talking about geopolitics. Iran is very charged.
Iran. I mean, that's blowing me away. Turkmenistan came out of the blue. Like,
Right.
I didn't think about that.
Right.
Qatar, I had no idea
Yeah.
that it was so big.
Qatar and Iran are sitting over the biggest gas field in the world.
But now the Saudis have beef with the Qataris, right?
They do? Oh, yes, absolutely. That's one of the things I have in my dashboard right there. When you come to sensitive supply.
But they're both Sunnis.
They are, yes.
But we can get to that in a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then Venezuela. Okay, got it.
Right. So this isn't telling you how much they produce. It's just telling you how much they have underground.
Okay. So do you have a production?
Not in a map like this, but I can tell you, right up front. So this explains why, of course, Russia is connected to Europe by pipelines and selling a lot of their gas into Germany and everywhere.
We need to. This is. Sorry. This doesn't seem to have come out properly.
Okay. By the way, Sumit, we should say that the units of the chart are in trillion cubic meters.
Okay.
That's the label is not there.
No, that's better. Okay, sorry. Now we can see see the chart.
Okay.
It wasn't visible before.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So yes, as we said, the reserves are all in trillion cubic meters. The biggest producers are there, and then the next question is, of course, how much. The biggest reserves are there, and then the question is how much do we produce?
Yeah.
Right, and so there's a nice way to show this and to say, okay, so most of Russian gas is sold in Europe and in China. They're starting to sell it into China, and you may remember they built this pipeline going east, also for political reasons. Because obviously when they were having these sanctions with Europe and the States in 2014.
So the Russians have a pipeline through Ukraine.
Yes.
They've built one under the Black Sea to Turkey, or is it Caspian Sea?
It's both the Caspian and the Black Sea.
To bypass
correct.
Ukraine and Poland.
There are multiple pipelines, right? So they
have one going to China.
They have correct. So if you look at Europe, you have multiple pipelines running through. They pass through Poland or Ukraine, and they connect the three Baltic states and so forth. But there is one pipeline called the North Sea, which goes straight out of Russia into Germany, bypassing everybody. And now they're building the North Sea 2.
Does it go under the sea?
Yeah, under the sea. Correct. And the North Sea 2 has just been, they're just saying that they're moving that forward. And it's obviously sponsored by Germany, because Germany is going to buy all that gas.
And this is Gazprom?
This is all Gazprom, absolutely.
Wow.
Right. So that's Russia. Then the Middle East gas, most of it ends up in LNG into Asia. So it goes to China, it goes to Japan, Korea, etc., etc. That's what the Qataris are doing. Yeah,
in canisters, basically.
in these big ships. This is what we call liquefied natural
Oh,
gas.
okay, liquefied. Okay, fine.
Yeah, which is mostly methane.
Yep. So methane containers
Correct.
going to Asia,
Yes, exactly.
not China.
Well, no, including China. Yeah, there is some.
So what are the Qataris going to build a pipeline to Asia?
No, I don't think so. Well, first of all, because the Qataris are, well, they're landlocked. Not they're locked by the Saudis, right? Because their only exit through land to connect to, for example, Europe has to go through Saudi Arabia, unless they go up through Iran and into Turkey and then into Europe. So there is that possibility. And
But aren't they on the sea? Isn't Qatar on the sea?
Yeah. I mean, but you can build a pipeline through the sea, under the sea.
Yeah.
And Qatar and Iran are not that far. Now, I mean, that would be a really interesting thing to do, right? Connect Iran with Qatar by pipeline.
But why would? But they don't. Why would you connect the two?
I'm just speculating. If Qatar said we want to build a pipeline all the way to Europe, right?
You'd have to do it via.
You would have to do it via Iran.
You couldn't do it via Saudi because they
would never allow it, right?
Could Qatar build a pipeline to India?
It's too far. The problem with pipelines, Sumit, is that if your pipeline is more than about 2,000 kilometers, it just becomes incredibly expensive to build it. So then you would prefer liquefied natural gas.
So that putting it on ships is cheaper over the life of a pipeline?
Correct. And the distance of the pipeline, right? That's the thing. So you would never go all the way to India or East Asia because it's just it's too far. So better to build these tanks.
But Europe is pretty far. But those are overground.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pipeline already. There's a big pipeline system that has been built over the last 30, 40, 50 years.
Got it.
Correct.
So the Qataris, they have the big bubble there.
Correct.
They're going to have to keep on shipping it?
Yes. Oh, and they're happy doing it. They're one of the biggest suppliers. You don't see Australia there, but Australia is also an exporter of LNG.
So where does Iran send its gas?
Most of it ends up in Turkey. They use it a lot themselves, but they're selling into Turkey. They sell into the east just a little bit, right? And there's this discussion on the Pakistani connection and so forth. But the other thing is that Iran doesn't produce as much gas for exports.
Really?
Yeah, because
these are just reserves.
These are just reserves.
So okay, so Russia is a big producer. Mm-hmm. Northern Europe, China, via pipeline.
Correct.
Who's the next biggest producer?
Biggest producer is Russia, Qatar, and the United States. The United States is producing tremendous amounts of gas, and they are starting to export it. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that's where you have to consider. There's a measure we use in the industry, Sumit, which is the RP ratio, which is basically the reserves to production ratio, and it tells you, okay, you can have a lot of reserves, but if you're producing a lot, you will finish them quickly, right? So that's sort of the concept. And if you just look at it very very simply, the Middle East, including those big bubbles there, they have still at current rates of production, they have gas for another 120 years.
You want to show that chart?
Yes, that's in the. It's in the BP Statistical Review of World Energy in page 27.
Okay. BP Outlook?
No, the Statistical Review.
Okay. BP Statistical Review. Which page?
27.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, by the way, while you're looking for that, just for anybody who's listening to this, is if you ever want to know anything about the energy world and statistics and so forth, just go into bp.com. You can download this resource. It's called the BP Statistics.
Okay, so let's just put this in full screen mode, and all right. So you're going to talk about
So I'm going to show basically how much gas we have available for how many years.
Yep.
Right, and you can see that looking at all the Middle East gas at current rates of production, they still have gas for another 120 years. and places like Russia with Central Asian republics, they have gas for another 70 years, and this is assuming you're not finding any new gas, and we always find some, right? So North America, and this was my point, North America has a relatively small bubble. They're still in the top 10, but at current rates of production, they would finish their gas in about 15 years.
So it's Middle East and it's Russia, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what's the chart on the bottom?
That is just telling you the split by region of all those reserves.
And how they've grown. Wow.
Correct, exactly.
And they've grown because of new discoveries.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. That's why we keep saying that we're running out of oil, but when I was a kid, they used to tell us we're running out of oil in 50 years, and today I'm 50 and we still have oil for another 100 or maybe 80 years more. Anyway, keep those resources there because this is important. There's a map that we could show. It's in page 35.
Yep. Okay.
All right. This is
we're in the resource. In the BP thing.
In the BP thing, yes. So just
page 35.
35. Yeah. Just flick a few more pages.
Yep. Okay. Let me present that for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, key dokes.
Right, and this map has to be read in conjunction with the table immediately below.
Yep. Okay. So we can see that.
So you can see who are the biggest, how we are trading gas around the world, and it makes a distinction between pipeline gas, which are the red lines, and then LNG, which is the liquefied sort, in the blue.
Okay, so talk to me about this.
Yes. So this is actually answering your question from before.
So blue is pipelines?
No, blue is LNG.
LNG on ships, and red is pipelines?
It's pipelines, correct. So you can see that. Look at Russia first, right? So you have all these lines coming out of Russia.
And there's the North Sea one.
Yeah, well, exactly. And this doesn't exactly tell you where the pipeline is, but it's just basically telling you how it's bypassing Ukraine and Poland, which is a way for the Russians to basically...
So they do have... oh, wow, okay. So there is a pipeline going from Iran to Turkey.
To Turkey, yeah, because they have been connected for years, right? And they actually have a border between the two. They touch. The thing is, Iran has borders with about 10 countries, and they have a little.
So what's that pipeline going? The red line going to the middle of China, 36.1.
Ah, correct. So that would be the Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, the Central Asian republics, who have a lot of gas, and they have been trying to monetize it, right? Either selling the gas directly, or eventually.
So the Indians are kind of shit out of luck. The Indians and the Pakis don't have any pipelines.
No. They're getting most of it from via LNG, but the numbers are relatively small. Look at Japan and Korea, right? I mean, these guys are moving huge amounts of gas. Most of it coming from Qatar, or
44, 45.
Correct. You have Australia.
What are the units here? This is
billion cubic meters.
Wow.
Yeah. So the reserves I showed you were in trillion cubic meters.
Look at that 161. Oh my word.
Correct. That's the stuff going already today from Russia into Europe. But remember,
so these sorry to interrupt. These LNG blue lines are kind of nickel and dime. These red lines, like that 108.
Exactly.
That's from Norway.
Correct. Yes.
I didn't realize they had it.
Well, Norway produces some gas associated with their oil in the North Sea. Can you move down to the table?
Yeah.
Because that will give you the answer to your question.
This is very, very interesting. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So in the table below, it's telling you who imports and who exports, and when it's pipeline and when it's liquefied natural gas. And it's just interesting. But look at 2017.
Yeah.
So today the world is shipping gas between countries at a rate of 740 billion cubic meters, right? LNG is 393. So yeah, I mean, pipelines are about twice the size of LNG. But make this more interesting, Sumit. Look at 2016, and LNG has grown by more than 10%. Yeah, it's almost it's a 12-13% growth.
Yeah.
Extrapolate that into the future, right? And with all this gas we have available, and so this trade will only grow.
So you think the LNG growth rate, is so the 1 year growth rate is, wow, that's big.
Yeah, it went.
That's like 10%.
Correct. It went from 356 to 393.
And 70. This is what, 5% for pipeline?
Yeah, something like that.
Got it. And so most of the pipeline is coming from the CIS.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
And Norway. That is very interesting.
Yeah. You
and the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the Netherlands, interesting. They have gas. They actually have some shale. They don't want to produce it because it's.
But they're exporting gas.
Well, that's just telling you it's movements within Europe. No, they're not exporting it, as far as I know.
Got it. CIS.
Yeah. There's another couple of little points. There's you need to see Africa shipping across Spain. There's this. There are pipelines between Algeria and a little bit from. Going into Italy and Spain.
That's pretty significant.
And it's a big number. It's at 34. There's another big supplier there. It's Nigeria. Nigeria obviously has oil and gas, and they're participating in a big way.
So then, if we look at the imports, I mean, pipeline imports is Europe basically. Europe and the US.
100 of that is Europe. And then exactly you have
like if we added up all the Europe, that's pretty much that's the deal. So what are the Asians doing then? Like they're not importing that much.
Well, they're importing the LNG. If you look at look at China, India, Japan, that's where the big numbers in LNG are.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So Asia is 50, 75, 250, say 300.
Correct.
Billion
out of the 393.
Yeah, whereas Europe is basically 100, 150, 200, is about 500, let's say.
Correct, out of the 740.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And then the North American numbers you see is, of course, Canada and the US are connected, right? So
they're basically
yes, and this is interesting because Canada sells a lot from the west into the US, and then in the east the US sells into Canada, sorry.
Got it.
Right.
Okay. So,
and the other important point here to mention is the LNG exports out of the U.S. Okay, so just look at the first line where it says U.S. in the table.
Yeah.
Can you see how 2016 the exports of LNG were 4.3, and then the exports in 2017 are 17.4. So the number, almost went up by a factor of 4 in 1 year.
Exports
of LNG.
Yeah, got it. From 4 to 17.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's going to bring me, when I talk later about secure supply, how the U.S. has become virtually the new swing producer of oil in the world, and there's a lot of gas in there too.
Yeah.
So this all has to do with the story of shale and versus conventional and all that, which I will explain in a moment.
So, do you have a chart like this for
oil?
For oil?
We have it, yes, absolutely. So why don't we let's move on. Let me show you now the map. Can you go back to the slide with the map?
Yep.
Of oil reserves, and this is now what you're going to find.
So let me just do one thing here. Okay, so now what do we want to look at?
It's the next of the slide. So I had the map with gas. Now let's look at the map with oil.
Okie doke. Okay.
Yeah, you're going to find a couple of interesting.
World's largest oil supply, right?
Exactly right. Yes.
Okay, talk to me.
So now these are proven reserves. Reserves, and it's all in this is in billions of barrels. Right, so I was also we're missing the units right there. Comes from the same source, so we're comparing apples to apples.
Wow.
And now look, who has the biggest reserves of oil in the world? It's actually Venezuela. Venezuela has a lot of oil, Very heavy oil. We'll talk about quality in a moment, but it's very heavy and it's difficult to process, difficult to extract, difficult to move. And the only refineries that can actually take that oil are American refineries. So even though if you go to Venezuela, they will tell you how the U.S. is this big enemy, but it's their biggest trading partner because it's the only one who can buy their oil. Right? So Venezuela is a little wild card.
So why isn't there a whole refinery industry in the north of Southern America?
Well, no. Venezuela has big refineries. They built them over the years in the 70s and the 80s and so forth. But they have more oil than they can refine, and they were always.
So that chart that you showed there, the one with the years of production left.
Correct.
What does that look like?
For oil. All right. Well, if you look at it at oil in the RP ratios...
shall I get it up?
Yeah, why don't we? It's page number 13 back in the statistical review. So it shows you how, at current rates of production, Venezuela is producing no more than... Venezuela has about 120 years of production.
32?
Page 13, sorry. 13.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So you can see there the bar. This is South and Central America, which is mostly Venezuela.
Wow.
Right. Brazil has a little bit of oil. Guyana has some oil. Ecuador has some oil, but it's not that much.
So Venezuela is very important.
Very, very important. Yes, in terms of future reserves, and also because their production has decreased dramatically. I mean, Venezuela on a good day 20 years ago was producing over 3 million barrels a day. Today they're producing about 1.2.
Who owns the oil there?
It's it's all state owned. The company there, the big oil company, the national oil company is called PDVSA, Petróleos de Venezuela, or PDVSA. Now the problem is that basically PDVSA had very good people working there. They were always very, very they were very good, very reliable production. They were one of the well-behaved members of OPEC. Right? Now, for the last 10, 15 years, they basically, with Chavez and all his Bolivarian revolution, what he did is he kicked out a lot of the Venezuelan, the good guys working there. Put all the militaries there in the top posts.
Yeah.
And then he started basically playing the money from oil to give money to Cuba and whatnot. That worked until the price of oil dropped.
Got it.
In 2014. So now they obviously don't have the money. Chavez is dead. Maduro doesn't have an idea.
Do you think he was killed?
No, I don't think so. He had cancer and then he recovered and then he fell ill again.
So basically, I mean, the green bar there is just very surprising.
Yeah.
Middle East. So it's essentially Middle East.
Yes.
CIS.
Yeah.
And Central America. I think the red must be Nigeria, but their probably production is so low.
Yeah, Angola too, and also the northern, maybe North Africa, Algeria, places like that.
And so then, how is the oil? How do we get the oil? Is that pipelines or containers?
Yeah. No. So oil. Well, of course you can have pipelines, but oil is a lot easier to move than gas, right? We were talking about LNG, liquefied natural gas. I didn't say this, but in order to move the gas as a liquid, you need to cool it down to a temperature of minus 160 Celsius.
Yeah.
All right, minus 160 Celsius, which is obviously expensive. And that's why they build these huge tanks and pipelines and so forth. Tanks and ships, right? Because you need to keep it at that temperature all the way.
Yeah.
In the case of oil, it's a lot easier.
And they do that under the sea?
No. They do this in the ports, in the
the gas pipelines.
Oh yes.
Oh, that's just free flowing gas.
Yeah. So that's just pressured gas, right? So it's a lot easier.
Oh, for the LNG, they need to cool it down.
Exactly. That's why you have these huge ships that transport the gas.
And so for oil, they just
oil. You have a big oil tanker. They can put 800,000 barrels in one go, and then it just goes, right? So. If you remember the map, you have Venezuela with a lot of production. You have Canada also with a big bubble.
Yeah.
Why don't we go back to that, and then we'll talk about the flows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So looking at that, you have Canada also with a lot of reserves. Now these are mostly, a lot of those reserves are unconventional. These are
you want to go back to the bubble chart?
Yeah, exactly. Let's do that one.
Yep.
All right, so you see Canada there with quite a lot of reserves.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of these reserves are, of course, the unconventional, the tar sands that they have up in northern Alberta and stuff like that. And I mean, basically, they take 4 tons of sand and they extract a barrel of crude oil. It's an amazing process. It's actually an easy process. It's not a difficult one. It's just obviously expensive.
And how long is that going to last?
Well, at current rates of production, Canada has. Let me see. But it's North America has a good 30 years or so.
That's it?
Yeah. It's actually a lot when you think about it. I mean, the U.S. If you take the U.S. number, which is what 50 billion barrels.
50. Yeah.
And you take current rates of production, they're all will be gone by 10 years.
So this is all the stuff down south.
Yeah, absolutely. So this includes all the shale in Pennsylvania and all.
So that's pipelined to the U.S.
Well, a lot of that oil is pipelined, but the Canadians want to build a pipeline across the Rockies into Vancouver and the British Columbia coast, so that they can access the Asian markets better. But there's some political pressure to stop that pipeline.
Got it. And the Venezuelan
is mostly going to the U.S.
by ship.
By ship, yes.
Refined. Yes. And then the US export it?
The US produces a lot of gasoline. They consume most of it, but then they export some gasoline.
What do they use the Venezuelan oil for? For themselves?
Yeah. So
they refine it and keep it in the US?
Correct. You need to understand just the US is the biggest... the US is still a huge importer, even though they're exporting today, but they're still net imports.
Got it. And so where does the KSA oil... That's pretty big, man.
It is very big, yes. So KSA, and look at this. So if you go back to the bubble, so KSA has a lot of oil. Iran again has a lot of oil. UAE, Iraq, Qatar, right? Sorry, not Qatar, Kuwait. But look at the chart. You don't see Qatar there because Qatar is mostly gas.
Wow.
Saudi is mostly oil, and that makes a big difference.
So, which is the lesser evil?
It's a good question.
You intimated that you preferred gas.
I do. I think gas in the future is going to be better. It's cleaner, and it has that, as we were talking, for power generation is much preferred, right? You can also power your cars with gas, right? You could have compressed natural gas.
Do you have the data on reserves, gas versus oil versus, well, nuclear and renewables? It's infinite, but...
Yes.
What is...
Right. So where of all the supply we have, I don't think I have a chart with that.
I mean, are gas and oil equivalent in terms of if you were to add these bubbles?
Correct.
With the gas bubbles. We just do it now. I mean, 160... 220,
yes.
520.
No, I have the primary energy by fuel, but it's just a consumption. I don't have the.
Okay.
I haven't.
What's your sense? Though? Are they kind of equivalent, or is there more gas than oil?
No, I think there's probably a little. They're not too far off, but I would guess there's a little bit more oil than gas.
More oil than gas.
Yeah, exactly. Which interesting. You bring coal into the picture. There's more coal than anything else. There's a lot of coal out there.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'll show you. I actually have the map with the bubbles on.
Yeah. Let's do that. Right? Is that in here?
Yeah. It's my next. You go to the next slide, and then we'll come back to the map with the flows of oil, because that's just
world's largest gas reserves.
Yeah. It's actually the title.
Oh, the title is wrong.
The title is wrong. It should be the world's largest coal reserves. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now you have the US with 250.
Oh, India is huge.
It's interesting.
China, Russia.
The Middle East is not there, right? Russia has a lot of everything. Now look, Germany, South Africa, Australia, right? These places that you know, South Africa.
So is there hope for coal? Clean coal, as Trump would say?
No, I think clean coal is
bullshit.
Is a bit of an illusion. Yes, it's a nice thought, but in practice, nobody.
So what do we do with all this coal?
Well, today we're burning it in power plants. But even if Trump wants to,
revive coal.
Revive the coal industry. Coal is going away. Coal is shrinking, but
why? But is there something that we could do to leverage it?
Looking at the current sentiment, I would argue that most of that coal is going to end up underground, and they will never take it out. That's my.
But as a chemical engineer,
Mm-hmm.
is it plausible for there to be a process that could?
Yeah, you can convert coal into liquid fuels. Yeah, the Germans did it in the 1920s. The South Africans were doing it in the 1970s. So it can be done. You can produce coal. You can make chemicals and plastics from coal, right? But you will never dent. It's too small, and it's very very capital.
Is it expensive?
It is expensive, yeah, because the capital expenditure is just in a couple of steps before you make anything else, just in the gasification of coal. So that's why I would say that a lot of that coal will actually end up underground, because there will never be a market for it.
So, mate, is this a good time to talk about the relative cost of these?
Well, we could just very very.
Yeah.
I'll give you a quick snapshot now, and then we'll come back because I want to show you the chart with all the oil prices.
Okay.
But anyway, if you do it in units of energy, you basically find something like this. And I'm going to talk in BTUs.
Is there a chart you want to show?
No. I'll just say them quickly. So in terms of BTUs, because that's the number I have in my head.
Yep.
Basically, it goes like this. The price of oil in dollars per million BTU is about $10 per million BTU. Right?
Price of oil, 10 million. Okay.
Yeah, correct. So if you multiply that by 6, it's going to give you the price of oil in dollars per barrel, right? There's a relationship of about that 6 to 1. Now, in terms of the same units, dollar per million BTU, if you look at gas, you're going to find that gas has different prices depending where you are. If you're in Japan, the price of gas is about $8. If you're in Europe, the price of gas is about 6 or 7. If you're in the US, the price is 3 to 4. And if you're in the Middle East,
shale?
Any gas.
Because of shale?
Oh, because of shale? Yeah, absolutely. That's why the Americans are exporting, because now they have too much gas.
Yeah.
But if you're in the Middle East, the price of gas is perhaps $2, $2.50. So what does that tell you? Number one, gas is cheaper than oil. Number two, gas is regional, oil is global.
Got it.
These are two big.
That's
big
a massive.
yeah. Right. The whole logistics issue.
How much does Russian gas cost?
You will have to see
6?
the gas. Yeah, it's about 6. It's
6 at the door, like at delivery.
Yeah. So it's
how much of the 6 is kind of transportation versus extraction?
Pipeline transportation. Once you have the pipeline built, it's not very high. Yeah, I would argue it's less than $1 per million BTU.
And extraction?
Extraction will be probably between 1 and 2.
So the rest is profit.
Something like that. Yeah.
For whom? So of the 4 profit, who's getting that?
It's
Gazprom?
If it's Russia, it's Gazprom.
So they get all the 4, or do they have to pay off?
I couldn't be sure, to be honest.
No, so that's beautiful.
It's a good question. I don't
so,
know.
what about the so that's kind of pipeline model. What about for a Qatari?
Once you build the pipeline and it's already depreciated, so I'm not worried about that. But no,
when you Qatari gas going to Asia?
Japan. So take Japan. The price in Japan is 9. Production cost is 1.
Yeah.
And LNG is costing you maybe 4 to ship. It's much more expensive. That's the thing, right?
So the margins are the same. So they're still making the 4-5 per million BTUs. They're just Japan. The customers is paying more for it.
Correct.
And Iran, same deal.
It's very similar. Yes. And here you have to remember there will be a difference between if you're producing associated versus non-associated gas. So that's because associated gas is virtually free.
And who did you say had that?
Saudi has a lot of it, and the Americans have a lot of it. Yeah, actually, the entire chemical industry in the U.S. was built, and in Saudi was built on associated gas that was coming out of the ground. They were burning it.
So the Saudi gas, actually, I can't remember. Was it significant?
No. They're relatively small on gas.
But they were still there.
They were still there. Yes.
And that's associated. And that was all associated.
Correct, or most of it. Yes. But this is interesting, and again, we could talk about all these things, but the issue with Saudi, not a problem, but the issue is that most of their gas is already allocated for internal use, and actually the Middle East, if you look at the Persian Gulf or the Arabic Gulf, depending who you ask, you will find that the only real net exporters of gas is Qatar. Yeah, there's a pipeline between Qatar and the UAE. It's called the Dolphin Pipeline. The Kuwaitis buy gas from Qatar. The Bahrainis buy gas from Qatar, right? And the Saudis don't buy it for political reasons, right?
So just I'm gonna put we
Why don't we come back to the oil just to finish that picture?
Yeah, because you were gonna tell me. So I've put up the oil reserves.
Correct.
So
now the question is who produces how much, right?
Well, there were two questions. So one was the production, and you indicated that with the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are three things: the production, the distribution,
correct,
but also the different flavors of oil.
Correct. So let's talk about the three of them in one next to each other. So the first one is you saw the reserves, right? We know that Venezuela has a lot of reserves. We know that Saudi has a lot of reserves.
Blown away by that.
Exactly. So now, production. Who is the biggest producer of oil in the world today?
Yeah.
It's the United States. The U.S. is producing about 13 million barrels a day. Right? And this has to do a lot with shale. Well, it's of course a lot with shale, but it also has to do a lot with the fall in the oil prices in the last 4 years. Right? The U.S. used to produce 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago. Today they're producing 13. So they more than doubled.
And that has driven the price down?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'll talk about the price, and I have a chart perfectly later on. So then the second largest producer is Russia, producing about 12 or 11, somewhere around there. And the third producer is Saudi Arabia. Correct?
So they're sitting on their reserves, basically.
Exactly, yeah. So now, of course, Saudi has a lot of reserves. So if you do the RP ratio, Saudi will give you 60 or 70 years at current rates, whereas the US will only give you 10 years. That's the number I gave you before.
Wow.
Correct? Because the Americans, I mean, they're finding more. They're very happy producing. They started exporting again 3 or 4 years ago because their tanks got full because the WTI prices in the US dropped. And
so wouldn't they be more prudent with their production?
Well,
particularly if the price has gone down.
Absolutely. In the 1970s, they were so prudent that they actually banned exports of oil.
So what are they doing?
Today, they're happily pumping out. Because it's been a revival for the whole U.S. oil industry, and they're this is also politically charged, right? They want.
And so there's no regulation. It's all everyone.
Completely,
So this kind of sounds foolish.
It's a liberalized gas market. Yeah, well, I would say foolish. Yes, if the reserves were not growing, but you know what? They keep finding more. That's the thing. And since shale is playing a big role here, of course,
they find more via shale,
and shale gets better and cheaper over time. So they're finding more.
So tell me about the qualities of oil.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so oil is basically. I actually have a little chart there. You need to move further down. I have a chart that has a barrel and then just the major components of that barrel.
LPG, naphtha, kerosene.
That's the one, exactly right. So why don't we just park there for a second? So every barrel of, if you look at a barrel of oil, it's a mix of hydrocarbons, right? And hydrocarbons will be molecules with more or less carbons attached to each other, and that's what I refer to when I look at those numbers that say C5, C6, C7.
Yeah.
It's telling you how long the molecules are, right? How many carbons you have there. So if you look at a barrel of oil, average composition, you're going to find that a couple of percentage points is LPG, which is a mix of C3 and C4, propane, butane. And this is what we were talking about before about India, right? So that some of that LPG comes from the barrel of oil. It also comes from gas, but some of it from the barrel of oil. The next big chunk is what we call naphtha, the famous naphtha, which is from about C5 to about C12. And this is what we use globally to make gasoline. I'm calling it gasoline or petrol, but it's what we put in cars, right? The next layer is called kerosene, which is what ends up in jet fuel.
Yeah.
This is C11, C13. Then we have gas oil, which ends up in diesel. And then we have fuel oil, which is anything from C20 onwards, right? All the way to the asphalt and the bunker fuel, the waxes, the lubricants, all of that ends up in the bottom of the barrel, right? So that's just an average. Now look at the percentages of each fraction, and I'm leaving that at the end on purpose, because if you see those fractions, 40% of the barrel on average is heavy fuel oil, which is the stuff you don't want, because that's the one that sells cheaper. It's the bottom of the barrel. It's the dirty stuff. It's where you get that bitumen and so forth. So talking about Venezuela,
Yeah.
the composition of the oil in Venezuela again depends where you're taking it from, but there
What
are.
is 35 API?
Well, API is it means American Petroleum Institute, and it is a density unit.
So is it this breakdown is for a barrel coming out of where?
Well, I'm just taking a 35 API. Go to the next chart because that will answer your question.
Yeah.
All right. So in the next chart, I'm showing this comes from the International Energy Agency.
Beautiful.
So in the horizontal, you can see the API degree. Now, don't get confused. Higher API actually means lighter, so better quality.
Yeah.
And then.
So why is it gravity? I mean, that's counterintuitive.
No, well, it's
Density, wouldn't it be the more dense, the heavier?
well, that's. But
Or-
it's just a funny way. It's an interesting equation that they use to calculate that.
But is it the density of carbon molecules or the what is the
No, it's just that they're using the density over a reference density. So actually,
okay.
you don't get units. It's they call it degrees.
Yeah.
You end up with it's just a calculation.
So
So
it's a ratio to some.
yeah. So it's basically it's an eight-dimensional number because you're just dividing density over density.
Yeah.
Just think of it that way.
But the more dense, the lighter.
The less than okay.
That's weird.
Yeah, and it's I would prefer we don't get into that
All right,
because I'll tell you the calculation of API degree is difficult, right?
Okay,
they
fine,
just
fine.
do all these things, but just trust me when I tell you higher
Okay.
API is actually lighter crudes. So 35, you can see it right spot in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So that will be the sort of the North Sea Brent oil that you find.
Yeah.
And it will be some of the Saudi Arabian Arab Light.
By the way, is that finished?
It's declining rapidly, but it's not finished. I mean, they're still producing out there.
How much of it is Brit versus Norwegian?
No, Norwegian is larger than Brent. And again, remember they have multiple fields, right? So one field is called Brent, but they have other fields too.
Got it. Sorry to
So they're
interrupt.
still
Yep.
producing there. Yeah, exactly.
So Saudi is like classic.
Yeah,
Coke
well,
classic.
middle of the road, but that's just the Saudi light because they also have the Saudi heavy, which is
okay.
on the
Yeah,
left
yeah,
and
yeah,
pushing
yeah.
up, which tells you then the vertical axis is giving you how sweet and sour the oil is.
So what does that mean?
That just means how much sulfur you have.
Ah, okay.
Right, so no sulfur is sweet, and more sulfur is
And
sour.
so you have to take the sulfur out.
Usually you do, yes. If you're making chemicals, you can leave some sulfur in there, but if you're making fuels, you have to take the sulfur out. So otherwise, you have acid rain. Right, so
And that costs more money.
Yeah. So they do all of that in the refinery. They'll get rid of the sulfur. And the other thing they need to do, precisely go back to that barrel. Remember that 40%.
Yeah.
And this is 40% for a 35 API, which is a good oil, right? Some of the Venezuelan oils, the Merey field, has APIs of 14 to 17. It's not even on this chart.
So let's just pause for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 million BTUs of gas was, $4 to $9.
1 million BTU of gas was, 4 to 9 in
$4
the
to
range.
$9.
Yeah, exactly.
Depending on
Excluding Middle East, yes.
the LPG, yada yada yada. I mean, to the door. At source 1 to 2,
Correct, yes.
and then for API 35,
Yes.
delivered
Correct.
per million BTUs is how much?
It would be...
Did you say 10?
Yeah, it would be about 10.
10. Okay.
And you calculate that by saying the price of oil is $60 a barrel, divide by 6, that gives you the about 10 per million BTU.
And so it's 10 for 35 on the x-axis, 2 on the y-axis.
No, less than... Well, yeah, probably less than 2. Between 1 and 1.5 on the y-axis.
Is about
that's
$10.
a nice, good quality.
So when you get to kind of Saudi heavy or Kuwaiti, like 2.5 to 3,
you're
so
discounting,
10
you're
goes
discounting
to...
that by about... you're discounting that by about $10 to $15 a barrel, which would be 1 to 2 per million BTU.
So the price goes down.
The price goes down. Yeah. Heavier oils are always sold at a discount
Because it costs more.
Because yes,
to take the sulfur out.
basically the refinery is going to take that oil, they have to take the sulfur out, and then they're going to have to rearrange the barrel because they have too much fuel oil. So they're going to try to upgrade that fuel oil to make more gasoline and more more diesel and things like that. And they have equipments that can do that. We call them catalytic crackers and catalytic reformers and all these things that
No, but that's changing the x-axis.
yes.
Like if you just got a barrel of 35,
Yes.
you got North Sea Brent
Correct.
versus Kuwait.
Yeah.
How much does it, like, for a $10 for a 1 million, whatever, 60 barrels?
Yeah. Let's talk in dollar per barrel. Yeah. To make it easy.
How much does it cost to get the sulfur out of Brent, which is at a half?
Correct.
Versus getting the sulfur out of the Kuwaiti?
Yeah. Good.
Does it cost the same?
Well, it wouldn't be a very different cost in the. It would be marginal difference because basically once you build a machine in the refinery,
It just does it.
Yeah, it just does it. That's correct. But you'll still end up with a bit more sulfur. You may have seen those photos next to the refineries. They have these like mountains of a yellow powder there.
Yeah.
That's the sulfur they're extracting out of it.
So what do they do with that?
Well, they can sell it to industry. There's going to be lots of industries will use sulfuric acid and stuff like that.
So, like, between the Brent and the Kuwaiti, if it costs the same to get the sulfur out,
Yeah, a little bit maybe.
why would there be such a price difference?
Ah, right. So, yeah, I'm not so worried about the sulfur. I'm more worried about the density.
So it's that makes... So there's no real price difference on the...
No, not a huge.
Okay,
not a huge
got
one.
it.
The biggest differences will be on the horizontal because then, as I was telling you, some of the Venezuelan oils are in 17 API, so they're not even on this.
So it's total junk.
Yeah, it's like you're taking honey out of the ground in terms of viscosity.
So that 300 whatever number for Venezuela, what's the kind of average... Because it's not on here.
Yeah, correct. No, and it's difficult.
Is it like 15?
It's yeah. So I'll tell you, I got two different grades of Venezuelan. So one is the Merey one, which is really heavy. That's 14 to 17, and then there's the Leona crude, which is a little bit better. It's 24.
So it's still shit.
It's still
Yeah, that's just like...
Look at the Mexico Maya, right? So they always talk, if you look at Mexican prices, they will always give you the Mexican mix, they call it like that, which is a little bit of Maya and a little bit of the lighter ones, and it's always $5-10 cheaper than normal oil. But that 5 to 10 is not a fixed number. It changes depending on supply and demand and,
got it.
and where you are.
So, but the beautiful stuff is Malaysia.
Yeah. So Malaysia, you've got the Algerian, you have the Nigerian Bonny Light. That's very nice. It's light and it's sweet.
This, they do whiskey charts like this.
That's right. Right.
So where is my big question was always Libya.
Yeah. Libya is not on this chart. Libya is. Okay, I don't have the number from the top of my head, but I remember Libya is a relatively good crude. So it's definitely in the lighter side. It wouldn't be very different.
Should I just Google it?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
What do you want me to look at?
The thing is, just say, just call it Libya oil quality. See what comes out. Now, remember, of course, it also depends a lot on where you're drilling and because different
Libya
fields,
oil API. How about that?
Yeah, correct.
Let's have a look.
Different oils or different fields give you different qualities and so forth.
Oh my god, I'm offline apparently. So annoying. Let me just get a browser up. So, but you think it is?
From what I remember, it's relatively light. So it must be in the over 30. I'm looking at the Algeria Sahara blend.
What is very light? Doesn't tell you the API.
Well, what is it telling you in terms?
It's saying it's basically Libyan oil is generally high. No, it doesn't tell me. All right, well, that's something to follow up on. But you reckon it's sort of in the Malaysian territory?
Yeah, it maybe not as good as Malaysian. It's probably more.
How much do Malaysia? Do they have a lot of reserves or?
They have some reserves. I mean, they have the tallest, what used to be the tallest building in the world in Kuala Lumpur was the Petronas building. I'll tell you the reserves right here. I have them here. It's Malaysia.
So.
Yeah, it's not that big.
So on the x-axis, so if a million BTUs of 35 API is $10. What's a Malaysian?
You could be selling it at a premium. Not a huge
20,
premium.
30?
Oh, no.
15?
No, 11. I mean, yeah, so just as you discount a little bit below and a little bit above.
Got it.
That's why we like Brent, because Brent is a good marker. Even though there's not too much Brent in the world, but everybody refers their quality to how does it compare to Brent.
Got it.
And then they price their oil that way.
Cool, that's really useful. Okay. So then you want to talk about prices.
Well, before that, let's to finish. Let's look at who moves oil, who sells it, and who buys it.
That would be good. Yeah.
If you go back to the BP statistical review, page 25. Now we have the same map, but now for oil.
Yep, 25.
And it goes together with between the chart and the
major trade movement.
2017, correct.
Okay, let me just make sure.
Yeah, this data is usually updated in June of every year, so that's why we're still looking at 2017.
Okay, so let's look at this.
Right. So look, obviously, the Middle East is a big exporter, right? And you see, 87 moving in one direction. You have 40 something
267
moving, and then 267 moving to Asia, and the arrow is actually pointing at Singapore. Singapore is an interesting place because even though it's a tiny island, little city state, but they have a very large refining capacity that they built over the years, and it became a very large gasoline hub.
Got it. So is it Singapore or Malaysia?
No, it's Singapore. I mean, some of it may be Malaysia.
That was smart.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you look at gasoline prices in Asia, they'll always give you a marker in Singapore. Sort of basically saying it's like a crossroads, right?
Yeah, there's 150 going to Calcutta, it looks like.
So that's what you were asking. Where does India get its energy? Well, lots of it is coming. It's not Calcutta. It's generally India.
Orissa or somewhere.
Correct. And this is again when it gets politically charged, because you may have read about this, but the Chinese want to build a pipeline that cuts through from Myanmar through, so it's basically cutting Singapore and connecting into China. This is part of the
through India.
No. So you go around India, and then in the Gulf of Bengal, you get to Myanmar, and then connect through.
It's easier to build underwater oil pipelines.
No. It's easier to build on land, right?
No, underwater oil is easier than underwater gas. Or it's the same?
It's not that different.
It's the same.
No, because once you have it, it's just the transmission is right.
Look at that 200 going to China.
Yes, correct. And so that's the thing, and the table below will tell you how much different people are importing and exporting. Just move down the page, and.
This is like a data fest. All right. Take us through this, man.
Right, so you see there, you have it in millions of tons and billions of barrels, right? Or thousands of barrels a day. So let's look at the barrels a day, which is just easier to grasp because we know those numbers very well. So look at the United States. The United States is importing 7.9 million barrels, right?
Yeah.
But they're exporting 4.6.
What is crude versus product?
That's the crude that is converted into gasoline. When they talk about products, it basically means the products of gasoline that are refined from oil.
Okay.
Because the U.S. takes a lot of oil imported, they produce a lot of gasoline, and they export the gasoline.
Gasoline meaning
petrol,
kerosene, and naphtha.
Well, it would be. It's a few steps after naphtha, right? You take naphtha first, and then from there you make gasoline. This is the stuff you put in your car.
Okay,
right?
got it.
So let me give you a different example. I come from Mexico, right? So Mexico is a producer of oil. They export most of their oil to the U.S., and then we import back more than half of the gasoline from the U.S. So that's why it's just making.
So
this distinction.
7.9 import, 4.6 export.
Export, and this is big, the big number I want you to remember is that the 4.6 was 0 5 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah, the US didn't export any oil.
And this was the big production that you're saying they've gone
from
crazy
4 or
on.
5 to 13.
So the big importer is
The biggest
Europe,
importers are, well, yes, you have Europe.
China.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
You have China, you have India with 4.2.
Yeah.
Right. Japan as well.
And the big exporters are as we would have expected.
Correct.
It's, yeah.
Yeah. So Saudi Arabia is exporting, what is this? 7. They produce 11. They're exporting 7.
So I'm just focusing back on the little red lines. So
the lines are in tons. Remember, just
yeah.
so
I mean, we ain't. The independence from anything ain't happening soon.
No, and it's funny how
neither for gas nor for oil.
No, that's right, and I guess the more fundamental question is: do you really need the independence or not?
Well, let's pause because on that because we got to go to the geopolitics. We've been at it now for 1 hour 40 minutes, and I'm now only just understanding.
Yeah.
So the big you want to talk about prices?
Yes. So let's do the prices, and then we'll go back to the dashboard and start talking about the other issues. Yes, exactly. So go back to the PowerPoint slide, please. And just below where we were, there's a chart that has it's called Brent crude price, dollar per barrel. It's got a little blue line.
You know the this density chart, is that a standard chart?
That's
density versus sulfur. Or is that something you created?
No. This actually is from the Energy Intelligence Agency in the United States, and that's it's free information. It's public. I mean, they make.
All right, so we're showing the price of Brent crude. So now I understand why they use Brent crude. Got it.
Correct, exactly. So this is the best sort of international marker price. So if you go back to 1973, should
we look at the blue line?
Yeah, just focus on the blue line, which is a nominal price, right? If you went back 100 years before 1973, the price of oil was always about $2 per barrel. Yeah, somewhere even below that. But then 1973, you had the first oil shock, which is the political issue between Arabs and Israelis. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia shuts the flow of oil, and the price goes from 2 to 12. Yeah, that caused a big recession in the early 70s, and that's when the Americans banned exports of local oil, right?
So why did Faisal do that?
Because he was putting political pressure because it's basically related to the war with the Israelis. Right, and he wanted to make the Arab voice heard more in the world, and he said, "Well, if we think this is unfair, all of this is happening," and then he cuts the flow.
Can I just ask: is the blue line the price at the pump correlated exactly to the blue line?
Not exactly, but it's very close. So if you plot crude oil and gasoline prices, you're going to find that they move together.
Is it like a 10%?
You mean
move in the blue line is a 10% move in the.
So it wouldn't be too far. The numbers I don't remember them exactly, but it's basically if the price of oil is 100, the price of naphtha will be $900 per ton, and then gasoline will be 1,050, right? So there's always going to be this ratio of about 1.2. It's about 1.2. It's about 1.25. The price of oil multiplied by 1.25 will give you around the price of gas.
The Iranian Revolution was the next.
Yeah, so that's late 70s, of course. But the important thing to remember is that these big jumps that you see are very sudden, and they're caused by disruptions in supply. Correct.
But there's no correction.
There is no.
So they get bumped up.
Correct.
But they don't come down.
They keep it that way. Yeah, that's right. a lot of that was perception. A lot of that was people getting scared that there was not going to be any more oil later on, right? But then look, in the late 80s and through most of the 90s, the price is between 15 and 20, maybe between 10 and 20. But then you see another big rise in oil prices. That's obviously driven by demand, which is mostly China. It peaks in 2008. It drops in the financial crisis, and then it comes back up. It bounces back up because, of course, demand driven. It's more resilient, right? Those Chinese who bought their cars, they still have their cars after the fall. The big fall in September, starting in September 2014, is because of additional supply. And the story basically goes like this. In this chart, starting from about 2009, the Americans start producing more.
Yeah.
They start with shale gas, and then they start using the same technology for oil, and they start producing more shale oil, and then suddenly, the numbers, the production goes up, the tanks get full, they open the floodgates, and they start exporting crude. But they come to the world with 4, 5, 6 million barrels extra every day that were not there before. In a demand of 95, if you're bringing an extra 5 or 6, that's a big number, right?
So talk to me about that, like I don't know, how would one present the impact of marginal capacity on average price?
Okay. There's a really good rule of thumb that we use.
Yeah.
And we say that the marginal barrels in the world are about 2 million barrels. Right?
Yeah.
So a lack of or surplus of 2 million barrels will drop the price to 40 or will make it jump to 100.
On an average of 60.
So let's take the price today. Let's take a $75, right? Which is
where we are now.
We're a little bit below that, but let's say 75 or 70.
Yeah.
2 million barrels extra
out of 95.
Out of 95.
So a 2% swing.
Correct.
Will give you.
Will push the prices $20 or $30 up, or will bring them down.
So 2% swing in supply.
Yeah.
Will give you 50% price swing.
Something like that. Yes.
So do you have the data on the production by country?
Yeah. We have it. Absolutely.
Because I'm just interested in.
Yes. So. Let me finish the story of this because this will actually make it very, very. I'm going to get to a conclusion. So the Americans come out with a lot of more production.
So they're with 4 million barrels. So that's like double.
Correct.
So you'd expect massive movement, and that's kind of what we see here.
And that's what happened. It went down from 110 to 40. So it hit 30.
Yeah.
It hit $30 at some point.
Fuck.
And you know what the Arabs did in the beginning? The OPEC, when the American production increased, they didn't cut production. They actually started pumping a little bit more because they said, we're not going to lose market share. And they said, if this oil from the US is from shale, it could, shale is more expensive than conventional. Let's drop the prices to get the shale people out of business. And we'll raise the prices.
Is that what they did?
That's what they did. That was this whole thinking in the beginning of 2015. Even Al Naimi from Saudi Arabia was quoted in the papers talking about that.
So at the bottom there in 2015, the Saudis tried to drive up production.
Correct.
To get the oil price below the economically viable price point.
Exactly. And they brought it down to a level of $30, which was hurting. It hurt everybody. It hurt too much. And actually a lot of Americans, small companies went bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
But we saw consolidation. We saw improvements in efficiency. And today, shale can easily produce at $25. They can still make money.
This is the thing about the Americans, man.
They have this
unbelievable
drive, isn't it? It's amazing.
Unbelievable. so the Yanks now can do it at 25.
Yeah, well, there's a range. There's always a range, but in every type of thing, there's always a range. But yeah, shale production today, as low as 25, it can still make money. And this is the big thing we need to understand. The world has changed over the last 50 or 70 years, the swing producer of the world was Saudi Arabia. Saudi
Yeah.
will always produce a little bit more or less just to keep demand and supply balance. But now they're not. They have a little bit of swing capacity, not that they use it, but they have it. But the real swing producer is the Americans, because shale production can be switched on and off easy.
So that's the thing. So the Saudis, they are how much swing do they have?
Okay, so
because that's the real analysis. That's what you're saying. Is that you've set up all of these whole kind of continuous processes.
Correct.
And so are they at like 80% of what they could pump out?
No, they're
or are they 50%?
They're probably higher than that. You're
at 90?
Yeah, because let's say between 80 and 90, right? But they're making. You need to differentiate the two things. Conventional oil production is you need a lot of investment. It's going to last you for 20 or 25 years, right?
And then you got to produce at that level.
Correct. And so in the beginning you're going to be pumping a lot, and then it's going to be declining over time. There's always decline. It declines by about 5% a year.
But if you build all of this stuff and you're at X barrels a day, you can't bring it down to 0.5x.
No, because you're relying a lot on the pressure down there. You're obviously controlling it. You can also enhance it with pumping stuff in there, right? But if it drops, you may not be able to bring it back up, right?
That is critical.
Whereas in shale, the investment is a lot lower. With $5-10 million, you could.
That is a game. That's it. So that's the problem.
Yes, and so shale declines a lot faster. It declines in about 50% a year, right? So you basically make a hole, you use it for two years maximum, and then you pick it up, move it somewhere else, and drill again, right?
So the Saudis would never swing. What about in gas? That's you probably have no flex. Do you have flexibility?
It's less flexible, except for shale, right? Because again, shale.
But if you gas fields, you open the thing.
Yes.
And you control the pressure, and it is what it is.
Exactly right.
And you just keep on bottling it.
Yes.
So tell me one thing. No, sorry. I'll put
and I'll just say, because there's another little consideration here. So shale declines a lot faster, but investment is lower, and it's movable, and it switches on and off.
Swing.
That's the big thing that has changed.
So the US are at 4 million of oil.
Today the US is producing 12 or 13. They're producing more than Saudi Arabia today in barrels per day. Right? That's why the price of oil hasn't, even though they've done the cuts, it hit 80 in October and it fell again, right?
And are they the swing producer also for gas?
No, it's been much more for oil. The dynamics of the gas world are not like that, because remember, the oil prices are global and oil moves around easily. That's where the swing production is more important. Whereas, and this also explains why gas production is more local, right? Because it's difficult to move it, and unless you have the LNG or the pipelines.
So what would the chart of gas look like?
The chart of gas, you would find. If you did it in dollars per million BTU, you would find something really interesting. I don't have the chart here, but basically I'll describe it. If you go back to the 1990s, gas prices in the US were $2 per million BTU.
Yeah.
Then they went up to 8, 9, 10 in the 2003, 2004, around that time. They hit the highest level, and then they dropped again to $2 or $3 or $4, which is where they are today. So they dropped too, but before oil. Because shale oil happened about 4 years before shale.
So is that the US price of gas?
The US price today is 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Yeah. In Houston, right? Or in Texas.
And the Russian stuff you said was about the same.
But in Russia, remember in Russia you cannot measure the gas in Russia. You measure it in Germany, which is about 6.8 today or something like that. It's not too far from there.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So that's why we need to remember
the local markets.
The dynamics of gas are always local, but they will become less local over time. The more LNG we build, the more these gas prices will start converging, and maybe we will have one day when we.
I knew this guy. I don't want to go into too much detail, but he worked at one of the big hedge funds, macro hedge funds.
Right.
And he was telling me a story that he worked on a project where they used satellite data to measure the distance between the top of the hull, the ship,
Right.
and the sea level. They measured the immersion
Right.
of tankers, of ships. He didn't tell me. I'm pretty sure it must have been oil tankers.
Probably, yes, because that could tell you how full they were.
Yeah, so I just want to check the plausibility of this. So he told me that they used to do that, and then they would trade, right?
Yes.
They would trade oil
Yes.
on it.
Yes.
So is that plausible? Like, would you send tankers that are half empty?
Oh yes. Well, maybe not half empty, but let me put it differently. You can sell tankers without a firm destination, so you just send them, and they're seaborne, and then you decide eventually.
But would you ever send a tanker that wasn't full?
Okay.
Because this story is bull. Like,
Yeah.
if you say to me, no, the tanker will be full to the brim, and you send it out.
I would think you would fill it.
Then-
I'm not an expert on that. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's an
Yeah.
interesting thing.
But
Okay,
But
yeah.
let me tell you one. It's a good one too. Remember when they were signing this deal with Iran and the Americans and the Europeans before Trump came along and so forth? Iran was ready to go to the markets, and they had tankers full of oil waiting in Bandar Imam,
Really?
south of Iran. Just basically, as soon as everybody would sign, that product would go out into the world. Right.
What would that have done? Like, how many, like, of the 95
Right.
in oil?
Right.
None of that is Iranian, is it?
Well, no. Iran produces oil today.
But are they allowed to ship it?
They sell it in India and in China. They don't sell it in some of the other world markets, right? In the West.
So the Indians are allowed to buy it?
A lot of that oil is moving in the shades, right? The money is deposited somewhere in Dubai in some bank account.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, I mean, let me tell you the production in Iran. Iran is producing. Remember, they have big reserves, right? And they're producing about 5 million barrels a day of oil, right? Of course, a lot of that they consume it captively.
So let's do this. Let's pause, and then I think. Is there anything else before we go into geopolitics?
I'll say one more thing only.
Yeah.
Remember this is something that not everybody's aware of. When you drill in a field, you're going to extract oil.
Yeah.
But the average amount of oil you take out is about 50%. The other 50 stays down there because it's too expensive to produce it. This is important because if the prices of oil ever go to $200 a barrel, you can go back to an old field and extract more. Right? So actually the reserves of oil, the recoverable reserves of oil are flexible. They're flexible based on the price.
All right, let's pause and then we'll come back to geopolitics.
All right.